عسى أن تكرهوا شيئا وهو خير لكم وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وهو شر لكم والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون. Perhaps you may dislike something which is really good for you, or you may like something bad for you, but Allah knows what is best for you and you do not. This stresses to us the fact that what we experience in life, ultimately, good fortune or bad fortune, is ultimately from Allah, the good and the evil. This is why the sixth pillar of faith in the Islamic system of belief is belief in the destiny, the good of it and the evil of it. We don't have a problem in dealing with evil in the world, where it came from, etc. We know it is by the permission of God. We are taught to seek refuge in the chapter, one of the last two chapters of the Quran, known as Al-Falaq. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of the Dawn from the evil of what was created, of what He created. Evil that may come from Allah's creation, we seek refuge in Allah from it. And this is an essential part of the belief system with regards to God, which requires that we reject, on the other hand, all forms of dependencies on the pieces and particles of this creation, which people commonly associate as being sources of good luck, or people avoid considering them to be sources of bad luck. In all societies, people have charms, amulets, there are numbers, there are events which they associate to be signs of good luck. For one's belief to be pure with regards to God from the Islamic perspective, these feelings have to be removed from one's heart. There is a tendency amongst people, especially amongst the non-believers, but it even creeps over into the hearts of the believers, that if a person goes out looking for a job and doesn't find a job, they continue to search, they're not successful in finding any job. Then one day they go out and they find the job they were looking for. There's a tendency on their part to want to associate something to that finding of the job on that particular day. So either that day of the month or that month of the year becomes a good luck month for them, or the clothing that they were wearing, the pants, the tie, the belt, the shirt, become good luck pants, good luck tie, belt, shirt, whatever, or good luck dress or coat or whatever. So that anytime they're going out, they will put it in the cupboard, they keep it in a special place. Anytime they're going out and they need, some extra sources of help there, then they take out their good luck shirt or tie, pant, dress, whatever. They put it on when they're going out. This may be done clearly and openly. You'll have people who will openly tell you, this is my good luck belt. But other people, they may not be saying that, but in their heart there's some attachment there. And this has to be removed from the heart. One has to be clear in this regard that nothing takes place except by the permission of Allah. Society which has rejected God tends, as we spoke about before, to make in the place of God the God of good luck. And as such, they have many rituals. Western society, Western technological society, which is supposed to be, so much fixated in the scientific approach, you will find the peoples of the West deeply involved in these kinds of superstitions and omen taking, etc. I know, for example, this presently in America, the latest fad is Feng Shui. Those of you who don't know what it is, I'll tell you. It is called geomancy. Don't know what geomancy is? Okay, I'll also tell you. Geomancy means that if I'm going to give this lecture, if it was a fundraising lecture, for example, and I want to ensure that I get the maximum out of you all, the Feng Shui expert will come and tell me, listen, you better put this glass of water here and the other glass here at this angle. And you need to change your table's direction slightly to the left and your chair slightly this way. And this change in the geographical arrangement of the objects on your table, your chair, etc., will bring about good luck for you. The Chinese are the experts. That's why it's called Feng Shui. They're the experts. And people like Donald Trump, for example, big time, real estate tycoon, anytime he's building a new, skyscraper, he brings in a top Feng Shui expert from Hong Kong or mainland China, and they give his architects the details as to where to set up the windows and, the furniture, etc. It's very popular. And this is an expression of the same desire. A common expression found also in America, in England, Europe, is in the negative sense, is the number 13. We know in America you cannot find a 13th floor in any building. The elevator will every time tell you 11, 12, 14, 15, 16. 13th floor has disappeared. Now, some people really believe this is a bad luck floor. As such, they would never rent on that floor. Perhaps the owners of these hotels or apartments, etc., they may not themselves believe in it, but they know that if they have a 13th floor, nobody's going to rent on it. So no point. May as well change it to 14. They'll rent. And this is deeply embedded in the society. So much so that there is one particular case which, always never ceases to amaze me every time I think about this. It was the case about the Apollo moonshot, which they made a movie about it just a few years back. The Apollo. Where they sent off this spacecraft with the intention of landing on the moon. It was part of the moon landing series. And unfortunately, something went wrong with booster rockets and this, that, and the other, and the spaceship was heading off into space. Now, if this had been Russia, no big deal. Americans had picked up on their radio telescopes many times messages from Russian spaceships as they head off into the sun and head off into outer space. Help, 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 In Russia, people are dispensable, disposable. So they can try many, many attempts, and it doesn't matter if you lose a few lives on the way. But in America, one life, the loss of one life is, such a big thing that it was a major tragedy for the whole society. Everybody was glued to the television, wondering what's going to happen to this Apollo mission. Eventually, they were able to use the booster rockets of the lunar lander that they had with them, and they managed to catch the gravitational pull of the moon and swing back down, fall in the Atlantic Ocean. They picked them up, brought them to Cape Canaveral. When they came off, the helicopter came walking down the tarmac. All the reporters rushing up to them, Everybody is just cheering, clapping, happy. And the reporters were asking the main commander of the flight, they asked him, how do you feel? How do you feel about this situation that you just came through, He said, I should have known this was going to happen. They said, what? You mean before you took off, they told you there was some problems with the rockets, the fueling, because sometimes before the flights they have to change this and change that, last minute delays. Did they tell? He said, no, none of that. I said, then how? He said, this is Apollo 13. Now this man is a PhD in biochemistry and nuclear physics, and he's saying it is Apollo 13. It took off at 1300 hours, 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock is 1300 hours. On Friday the 13th. You know, what else could you expect? You have that many 13s coming together, you know, to expect to get through this without a problem. It was just, but this is how deeply embedded it is in the society. So, for one's faith to be acceptable in this regard, these kinds of feelings, these kinds of beliefs have to be rooted out. And one has to put one's trust back in God again in the full sense. That whatever takes place is by the will of God. Secondly, with regards to God and human beings themselves, how do we conceive of God? Our perception of God has to be in accordance with how God has been revealed to us in revelation. We cannot use our minds to imagine God, to put together some image or concept of God. Because we, being finite beings, cannot grasp the infinite except to the degree that God has chosen to reveal something of Himself to us. So, for one's belief with regards to God to be correct, to understand who is God, one must limit oneself to the understanding which is presented to us through Scripture, through divine revelation. And of course, when we're looking at revelation today, what we're talking about is the Quran. Because the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, have been so distorted and changed over the centuries that they no longer become reliable sources for the description of God. There is a formula that we have to follow in understanding God, even in the descriptions that He gives us, because of the fact that the descriptions are in our languages, in human language. These descriptions of the infinite in our finite languages are naturally going to have in them some areas of possible misunderstanding, some areas of obscurity. So, in order to ensure that we don't fall into the misunderstandings and misinterpretations, there is a basic verse from the Quran which we use as the guiding line for understanding the attributes of God as He has described Himself. That is in Surah Ash-Shura, verse 11, wherein God says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing like Him, and He is the hearer and seer of all. He confirms that nothing in His creation is similar to Him. At the same time, He affirms that He sees and hears all things. Seeing, in our languages, implies eyes, a retina, an optic nerve, and a brain to interpret the signals which come through it. The whole eye apparatus, this is seeing, involves this. But when we speak of God as seeing, we don't attribute that to God. Similarly, hearing. When we think of hearing, we think again of the ear apparatus, the cochlea, etc., and the brain to interpret it. But when we speak in terms of God, we do not think, this should not come to our minds. He sees not in the way that we see. Nothing hinders His sight. Our sight is limited, finite. We can't see what's outside of this hall. God sees without hindrance. Our hearing is finite. We cannot hear what is going on in other parts of the world, in our homes right now. God hears all. And this is how we perceive of Him. And this is important because oftentimes people who have grown up in a tradition of visualizing God, as is common in Christian tradition, where in most of the sects of Christianity, images of God are used. Paintings, drawings, carvings, etc. Oftentimes they will ask, well, if you don't have an image of God in your mind, then, what do you have there? I mean, they feel that to worship, you must have an image. Your mind has to create an image in it that you are relating to in the course of your worship. Whereas, from the Islamic perspective, no. For you to create an image in your mind, you have now depicted God in a way that He isn't. Because any image that we can create in our mind is a result of what we have seen, what our eyes have perceived. It may not be in the same form. Whether we mix it up, we think, okay, God's a spirit. We say spirit, that is, what is a spirit? It's a smoky-like thing, isn't it? Spirits are smoky. So in your mind you think of a smoky, hazy thing. Once you do that, then you're thinking of smoke and haze. You're not thinking of God anymore. Right? So the correct way of understanding God, perceiving God in terms of His attributes, is not to give Him any of the human attributes, to restrict ourselves to the descriptions that He has given of Himself, and not to perceive them in terms of human attributes. Consequently, as an example of what happens in the Bible, where God is described in the Old Testament, as having created the world in 6 days, right? And it says in Genesis 2, verse 2, and on the seventh day God finished His work, which He had done, and He rested on the seventh day from all His work, which He had done. So this is attributing to God tiredness. After you work for 6 days, you get tired, you take a rest on the seventh. This is why we're saying that we can't use the Bible as a source of understanding God in terms of His attributes. The Quran instead, in this same context, says, no tiredness overcomes Him nor sleep. With regards to God, this is in the second chapter also, verse 255, Ayatul Kursi. Allah says there, not only doesn't He sleep, He doesn't take a rest, He doesn't get tired. Don't even attribute to Him tiredness. This is weakness. So, the concept of God being unique in His attributes is essential. Whatever He has described Himself as, these attributes are unique to Himself. Meaning that we cannot give also the creation, the attributes which belong to Allah, to God. Not only is it not acceptable for us to give Him our attributes, but it's not acceptable to give His attributes to ourselves or to the creation. This act involves what is known as shirk. This is a destruction of the foundations of the faith. Again, when we look in the Old Testament, we can find many statements attributing to the creation attributes of Allah. For example, in Hebrews 7 verses 1 to 3, we find this Melchizedek, who is described, the king of Salem, as being without father or mother or genealogy, and has neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. Having no beginning of days or end of life. No beginning, no end. This is God. This is not a human being. And it is on the basis of this principle that most sects of what are known as the Shiites are considered outside of the realm of Islam, though they are commonly referred to as Shiite Muslims, etc. And as individuals, they may have acceptable beliefs, but as a movement, as a group, they represent, in fact, another religion, because they have another conception of God and man. For them, this is with the exception of one group among them known as the Zaydites,